Alright, welcome to the last unit of this school year. This is Ecology, and in the Ecology unit we're going to talk about specifically chapters 3 through 6. You might remember from early on in the year that we really skipped, we skipped 3 through 6, we went 1, 2, and then we skipped 3 through 6, we went 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15, 16, and then now we're coming back to 3 through 6. And the reason we keep the chapters 3 through 6 or Ecology unit for the end is that it's typically the easiest. We don't have as much time to study it, but we do have ample time, and so we do expect you to still study and score well on the next exam before we move into finals. And so in this unit we're going to talk specifically about ecology and what ecology is. This is going to be a really quick lecture that kind of gives a basic kind of overview or a preview, so to speak, of what ecology is. And ecology is really just the scientific study of the interdependence between and among organisms and their environment. So when you're studying an organism and how that organism responds to its environment, both the abiotic and biotic factors, meaning how that organism responds to the living and non-living components of its environment, is really what the study of ecology is. Okay, there are people that will study rabbits in a particular population in a particular environment, and the interactions of that rabbit with the living things like other rabbits and like the flora that it's eating, but they also study the non-living or the abiotic factors that rabbit is exposed to, like pollution and air and soil and humidity and salinity and stuff like that. Okay. Biosphere, the combined portions of the planet in which all life exists. You've probably heard the term biome. Okay, biomes are particular sections of Earth like rainforest and desert and grassland and temperate forest and stuff like that. Biome is a place on Earth where life exists, and typically the life is all related to the same kind of environment. So you have rainforest organisms that all live in the rainforest. You have desert organisms that live in the desert, but biosphere puts all of those individual biomes together, and it's a part of the Earth like the atmosphere. Okay, atmosphere and stratosphere are all layers of the Earth, but biosphere is the layer of the Earth where life exists. And so if you find life in a layer on Earth, it is the biosphere. Levels of organization is going to go from basically most complex to least complex. So species is an individual organism that belongs to a particular species. And last chapter we talked what a species was. A species, remember, is an organism that can reproduce with organisms of its same kind. So you start with a species. A group of same species makes a population. A population of deer and a population of rabbits and a population of robins all make up a community. Okay, a community is a bunch of individual populations living in the same area. A bunch of communities living in the same area make up an ecosystem, but this is the layer, or this is the level of complexity or organization where non-living components come in. Okay, and so if we say this one right here is where non-living components come in. This is only living, only living, only living, all living and non-living in a particular area make up an ecosystem. So this would be things like that community of deer, rabbits, and sparrows, and its non-living things like the soil and the air and the salinity and the pH and the humidity. Okay, when you put individual ecosystems together, you get a biome, and when you put a bunch of biomes together, you get a biosphere. So individual organism, a bunch of that individual organism, other populations or multiple populations of various organisms, multiple communities with abiotic or non-living factors, a bunch of ecosystems together, a bunch of biomes together, and then biosphere is ultimately part of the Earth. Here's another way to look at it. Okay, if we start down here at a molecule, because you remember from early in the year that molecules make up organic molecules. Okay, smaller molecules make up compounds, and then cells are made up of molecules. So molecules make up cells. Cells are the smallest functional unit of life. They are the basic unit of life. Groups of cells make tissues. Okay, tissues make up the organism. Organisms make up a population of that organism. A population of organisms make up communities when you have multiple populations together. Communities will make up ecosystems. Ecosystems are the living and non-living components of a particular environment, and then multiple ecosystems make up the biosphere. And remember, biosphere is the layer of Earth where life exists. Okay, so what is ecology? Ecology is, like we said, the study of organisms and its environment, but the way in which organisms are studied is multiple, or we have multiple facets of ecology. Okay, so you have observing. So ecologists are going to observe animals in their environment. Okay, so the first step in asking ecological questions is what species live here? What species live here? How many individuals of each species there are? And how do you find those questions, or how do you find those answers? You observe. Experimenting. You obviously can use experimenting to test a hypothesis. So if you ask a question based on an observation, you then experiment by testing. So artificial environment within a lab setting could be an experiment. Natural ecosystems could be an experiment. Okay, depending on how you're going to set up your experiment and how you're going to make your observations, dictate what type of environment you're going to be testing. And then obviously modeling. You can gain insight into complex phenomena such as the effects of global warming or ecosystems by building a model. Energy flow through an ecosystem. Okay, it is very important for you to know that all energy that comes into an ecosystem starts as sunlight. Sunlight is the main energy source for all life on Earth, and the way in which organisms produce sunlight is all about the producers. Okay, how does sunlight, which is kind of an inorganic, kind of abiotic thing, produce life on Earth? And it starts with producers. Okay, so this is the first level, producers. Producers are also called autotrophs. Autotroph means that they are self-feeding, and so we have these differences between autotrophs. You have photoautotrophs that use light energy, photo, light, and we have chemoautotroph, which use chemical energy. An example of a photoautotroph would be a plant. They use photosynthesis. We know what photosynthesis is from earlier in the school year. An example of a chemoautotroph would be bacteria that live in the bottom of the ocean and are using chemical energy to produce carbs. Okay? Consumers make up the second and further levels of ecosystems, okay, or environments. And so heterotrophs are the opposite of autotrophs. Heterotrophs are the consumers. Herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, detritivores, decomposers are all types of heterotrophs. Herbivores obviously eat plants. Carnivores eat meat. Omnivores eat both plants and meat. Detritivores are going to eat decomposing plant matter called detritus. And decomposers are obviously the organisms that are doing the decomposing, like a mushroom. Okay, so let's talk about the types of feeding relationships that we'll see in ecology. This is an earthworm. It is a detritivore. This is a plant. It is a herbivore or a producer. This is the bear. It's an omnivore. Fox. It's a carnivore. And then a fungus, like a mushroom, that is your decomposer. Okay. Last thing we're going to talk about is energy flow and feeding relationships. And so this is a food chain. It's a chain of energy as we go from sun to the producer, to the primary consumer, to the secondary consumer, to the tertiary, third consumer. So the first consumer, second consumer, fourth consumer, and we could even go further. A hawk could eat a snake. That would be the quaternary consumer. But there is a maximum of 5 trophic levels in any ecosystem because only 10% of the energy is going to pass on. And eventually, when you're only passing 10% on to the next level, it becomes harder to gain energy at a 6th and 7th trophic level. Okay, so food chain, one-way flow of energy in an ecosystem. Food web is a complicated network of feeding relationships in an ecosystem, and it looks more like a spider web. Okay. Here is your food web. Again, it is not a one-way flow of energy. It is a complex food web. It's a web of feeding relationships. You have your producers and decomposers at the bottom. You have your primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, and then you can even have quaternary consumers. Last thing, ecological pyramids. I said 10% of the energy is stored in each trophic level and can be transferred to the next. That means that if we have 10,000 kilocalories of energy at the producer level, only 10% or 1,000 kilocalories will be sent to this level. And then only 10% of it will be sent to this level, and 10% of it will be sent to this level. And so if we start with 10,000 kilocalories of energy at the producer level, we're only going to have, or that's going to equate to 10 kilocalories at the tertiary consumer level. What is most of the energy lost as? 50% of the energy, or 55% of the energy, is lost as heat at each level. You know that organisms are warm-blooded, and so most of the time you're giving off heat on a daily basis or a 24/7 basis. Where is that heat coming from? It's coming from the food you eat. So you eat food, and some of that food, in fact 55% of that energy, is lost as heat, and so 45% is what's left. Now you're going to use about 35% of that in cellular respiration processes, but that leaves about 10% that you can store and transfer to the next trophic level if you're eating. Okay? I think that's where we'll end this one. See ya.